Okay, so I have been asked to do a simple landscape, and I chose this landscape of a marsh scene because number one, you learn a lot because marshes have a very specific way to paint them, and number two, we can do it in stages, and you can actually stop halfway through and have a beautiful painting if you feel you can't do the next stage. What we're going to do is we're going to start first with our grisaille. And I made the grisaille in the normal way with yellow ochre, alizarin crimson, and a little bit of blue. And I'm going to thin it out with a lot of mineral spirits. And I'm just going to rub that on there. I like to start with a grisaille because then it doesn't feel like I leave a lot of white spaces. It catches all my white spaces, and I don't have to have that consciously in my head as I'm painting that, oh, I have to cover this. The other reason why I like a grisaille is because it kind of gives me more of a mass and a feel of the atmosphere that a charcoal pencil can't give me. So this grisaille is a little browner because I know that there's going to be a lot of orange in there, and so I don't want it too orangey to start, because once again, if you start right off the bat with the right color, where do you go from there, you know? In direct paint, if you're painting outside, it's always best to start with a grisaille because you're always fighting the light. The light changes every 2 hours or so completely. So you have to paint fast. And a grisaille actually helps you paint fast. You can even take a little bit of your thinner. I use Turpenoid to get it down to more of a staining as opposed to a color. And remember, the grisaille also helps with the it helps with the sky color too, because it gives it this warm undertone that you can't quite put your finger on when you look at the finished painting, but it's there. Now, some of these things from lesson to lesson are kind of redundant, and I do that on purpose because the redundant aspects of it are the foundations. And if you tell somebody the foundations in one painting, they're not going to remember it from painting to painting. So it's best for me to, like, every time I do a painting, to feel like I'm telling you for the first time. Okay, I got a kind of a noikely brush going here. Noikely is a acorn term. Jack made it up. It means something ground down. So using that same grisaille color, I'm going to do the drawing. Now, with every landscape, you figure out where your horizon is. And your horizon is, if it's down low, it means you're up high. If it's up high, it means you're down low. If it's straight across, it means you're kind of at level with the horizon. Not to be confused with the vanishing point. The vanishing point is where the eye meets the horizon. So let's say on this one, the horizon is not quite half. If this is half, it's a little above half. So we're a little bit below the horizon in reality from the photo. So it's probably about here. Now I've got really shaky hands today. I always make my straight lines on either by holding my breath or on my exhale. That's about right. You can always adjust it too when you're doing the sky and you're doing whatever's on the edge of the horizon. Okay, now what I like about this picture is, once again, and I look for this a lot in landscapes, it has the checkerboard field to give you distance. And when I say checkerboard field, I don't mean that it has squares. I mean it has a thing here, a thing here. So it has the this, 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 this. So it basically breaks down in mathematically like a checkerboard. Okay. So along this horizon, there's a little bit of land mass, and it's kind of bumpy and so forth. And I'm just going to, with my grisaille color, I'm just going to give a suggestion of that. Now, it doesn't have to be exact. You can just kind of give a suggestion. There's a couple of buildings in there too, but I won't put those in yet. So already it looks like distance. Now, the next landmass comes down a little bit, and it's pretty straight. It's almost like a second horizon. So it's a little, oops, it's a little wider on this end than it is on this end. It comes to about here, and sometimes it's best to put your points in first. It's about that wide, and it comes to that point there. Now, the bottom line is probably the straightest. So I'm just going to throw in a line across there. And then get another line, just kind of sketchy, but getting a little smaller as it goes out to there. And it kind of doesn't curve down like that. It's really up. I've already got paint all underneath my fingernails from mixing the paints. I mix the paints ahead of time. Okay, so the next one, the best way to do it is to look at your edges. Remember, these 4 lines are the most important lines of any drawing, is where your boundaries are. So the first one starts about here, and the second one is about halfway. If I go like this, yep, it's about halfway. So I'm going to put my first point here, and my next point halfway. Okay, and then I'm going to find my way to it. Now, this line comes straight out to about there, and then it does that. So, straight out to about here, and then it slides. But it doesn't just slide in a straight line. So, let's do the first one. Then the next point is a little bit lower. And the next one's pretty far over here. There's a bump. And then there's another bump. And then it kind of goes almost straight. And then it does that. So I came down a little lower than half, but that's okay. If I wanted to make it exact, I would do all the measurements, but I don't think you need to do that. Okay, now, we've talked before about negative space, and negative space is the space between the solid objects, and in this case, we'll call it the water. So this is a negative space. It's a negative shape. So it's about there to there. Right at these 2 bumps, there's another little one in there that's a negative space. And then the other negative space is here. To here. Okay, so This is water, that's water. Now to break up the grass, there are these lines that are probably little like inlets, but when you're looking across the marsh, you don't see the water in most of them if they're further away. So there's one that's here. There's one that's here. And then there's this one that connects to this negative space. So there's a mound here. And there's one here. And this is a darker area in here. And then there's a darker area down here. And there's a real dark area here. And then there's a kind of a medium dark right about here. Now, without the clouds, this is your abstraction. For the clouds, this is at dusk, this painting, this photo. So the clouds are going to be very interesting. The sky relationship to the water is going to be very different than what the average is. So I've often said that the water is a reflection of the sky straight up above. And during the middle of the day, yes, it is. But the minute the sun starts to go down or is coming up, what you have is the water is has streams of light on it. So it's interfering with that direct reflection. And that's going to be the case in this, which is one reason why I chose it, so that you could see another aspect of what light does. So, now, in the photograph, that goes straight across. And I may break that up because sometimes having more than, having all these lines going straight across sometimes can be uncomfortable and sometimes can be very good. So we'll have to see how that goes. So there's your drawing. Let's put in some darks. So I'm going to take a black, I'm going to add a little bit of grisaille to it because I don't want to go too dark at first. If, of course, we were doing a plein air painting, we would just go in with the darks. But because we're doing this in stages, we're going to contain ourselves a little bit. So this is the really dark one that I was talking about. So we're just going to throw that in as a dark. And all along this negative space, there's like these, the thing about marshes is it's not just grass. They come from like mud flats. So the mud flats themselves show at the edge of the grass. I remember one that I did that the mud flat was reflecting a light that was so beautiful. I wanted to capture it so badly. And it took about 7 colors to capture it correctly. We're not going to do that here. These are just darks. So you can make your black with dark blue and dark brown. If you're more into painting and you want to invest a little bit more, use a dark purple and a sepia. I think I explain those colors in another video. Okay. So these are the ones that They're parts of the mud flats that you sort of see, but you don't really. You just see a hint of them. So I'm going to put those in as a dark too, because I can always lighten those up after. You know, the thing about oil painting is you can make it lighter on top of a dark, you know, unlike watercolor, for instance. You know, you kind of have to cherish your lights. And then right across here is a big, huge one. Now, as things move back in space, they get a little bit bluer or they get a little bit lighter. For the most part, we're going to start with this same value, but then we'll lighten up where we need to. There. Okay, and for the sky. For the sky, I'm going to use a lavender and white. And the reason why I'm doing that is because it's dusk and the sky gets more purple as the sun goes down. And it's probably why I have a lot of purple in my paintings. So it's still going to be, it's actually rather consistent through here. And then this, of course, is a cloud. And then there's some kind of purpley peach color that goes under here. So let's just start first. Now, as I said, the sky's going to be a little darker than the water. Not much, just a little. Now, this is kind of coming across as blue, but trust me, it is a lavender. And the reason why it's coming across as blue is because of the orange in the grisaille is pulling the blue out of the lavender. Color is an amazing thing. It has its own mind. It's part of the reason why people have difficulty with mixing colors. I'm actually going to add a little tiny bit of Provence violet. You can get Provence violet with, I can't remember if it's Williamsburg or Old Holland. I have a huge tube, so it's been a while since I've bought it. Yeah, I'm going to add a little bit of that just to purple it up even more. But it's a good example of why I say the grisaille color affects the color. It pulled the blue out. So you're just going to knock in that color. I didn't wait till the grisaille dried either. I just jumped right in because I kind of like the grisaille mixing in a little bit, you know. Kind of gives it what feels like a local color. Now, as with every painting I do, not just these, nothing is ever carved in stone. You know, if I decide I need to change something halfway through, I do that. It's your prerogative. You're the artist. You can make decisions. For instance, in this photograph, there's a couple of like buoy kind of things that are sticking right up in the middle, which to me is, yeah, it's, you know, historically correct, but it's a little distracting. So I may take those out when it's time. So I'm just kind of scrubbing it in there to the chagrin of my brushes. Okay, now the top of this cloud is lighter than the bottom, which means that the sun is still above these low-lying clouds. So that would be the only reason why the cloud is lighter at the top. Otherwise, if the sun was lower, it would be lighter at the bottom. So I'm just going to throw in a light up there, cover that drawing line. It's interesting to paint on canvas again. I usually paint on ampersand boards, masonite boards, or masonite that I've made myself. Masonite is a type of, I don't know if you'd call it press wood or what, but it's a wood, and it's been around for years. And many art students use masonite because it's cheaper to make your own that way than stretch a canvas. And I use it because it's more archival. You know, anything can get punched through a canvas. Nothing's going to punch through a masonite board, although you can get scratched if you're not too careful with them. But that's an easy fix compared to a punching a hole in through it. Okay, now for the darker parts underneath. I used some of the lavender, less white, more Provence, purple, violet rather, and then a tiniest bit of yellowy orange, and I got this color. Isn't that a pretty color? You know, it's interesting. When I first started to learn how to paint, and Jack was my teacher, I was probably about 20 years old. And I can remember saying to him that I don't like to draw, I like to paint. And he said to me, Deborah, painting is drawing. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. And now, you know, after all these years, I completely understand what he's talking about, because painting is drawing. Because in your mind, just like drawing, you're there, you know. And lines are laid on the form, and color helps you make things further away or closer together, similar to line on drawing. I'm going to throw some white through here just to make that a little more form, and it doesn't feel so like cut in half. Remember I said I wasn't sure I was going to keep that? I'm going to keep it for now, but we're going to take another look at that next time. Now the water is a darker version of this. No, I'm sorry, a lighter version of that. And that's probably too light. I added some of the Provence violet to that, so I'm going to add a little bit to that too. Let's check the color. Still a little too blue. That's probably good. One thing I want to point out is I'm not very careful when I paint, if you notice. I'm just knocking it in. And knocking it in is another acorn term. I remember Jack using that with me when I was his student. And he'd say to me, Deborah, don't fuss, just knock it in. Just knock it in. So that's what I'm telling you, just knock it in. You can fuss later. It's kind of like you don't put the frosting on the cake until the cake is baked, right? Okay, so now you're kind of seeing your distance and so forth, and you know, consider that the beginning of your first day if you want, or your drawing. Usually I have more color before I consider it just the drawing, but so that we don't get too far ahead of you, you could call this the first day. Okay, let's put some color into the grass. So, the tops of the grass are where the light is streaming across, and the bottoms are a little bit darker. Okay, can you see that? I don't know if that shows you without light, but anyway. So let's start with the darks first. I mixed together I took alizarin crimson and yellow ochre, a little tiny bit of blue, but a little tiny bit of, I think I put some lavender in it. And I'm just going to knock those in on the tops of those darks. You know what, there's a little bit of water through here and here I forgot to put in. This kind of breaks up a little bit here. Some of these are more green than red, and I'll add that later. A little bit through here. The brush I'm using for this part is a number 4 Red Sable Master Stroke Blick brush. They're not too expensive. They're only probably about somewhere between $3 and $5 a piece, and they need to be washed really well after you use them with hot water and like Dawn dish liquid. This part down here is kind of greenish. There is a little bit of it though up through here. And sometimes you just need to drag it a little bit. You don't need to like completely fill it in, you know, you're gonna see parts of the grisaille showing through, and remember, that's okay. This gets really dark over here, so I'm gonna add some more dark to that. And before I forget, I'm going to throw in some water in here. Now there's also a reflection in the water, so I'm not going to go right up to that part. I'll go right up to the bottom. Oop, I forgot to add the Provence. A little bit in here. There's a little bit in there. Okay, now the reflection is rather dark, and then there's a light. You know, the light is just below this in some parts, not in all of them. Ooh, there's also one. Oh, I got that. And now I'm going to add the dark underneath it because it's a reflection. Sorry, I have a tendency to speak softly because it's a reflection. See, looks like a reflection. Okay, now the next step is to add some more orangey color. And right now I'm just going with horizontal strokes. The vertical strokes will come later. In order to do, I think I said this, in order to do grass properly that's in a distance like this, whether it's a field or whether it's marsh, is you've got these horizontal strokes because it goes back far, but you also have these vertical strokes because it's got depth. So you don't see a whole lot of the vertical strokes, a few up here, but mostly those vertical strokes will be down here and through here. Now I'm painting this a little bit thicker than a wash. Most people will throw a wash on first, and I often do too. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it so that if you want to stop halfway through this and have a painting like this, you know, you can, or you can take it all the way to the end. The most important part about a painting like this, for as far as learning purposes, is to understand that any painting, even if it's a portrait, is about the shapes and how they relate to each other, and the color and how it relates to each other, and the value, how it relates to each other, and the temperature and how it relates to each other. And if you learn those, you've learned a lot. It's not about the little details. It's about those foundations first. And this, to me, I consider this like the underpainting. Some people call this an oil sketch. My oil sketches have a little more detail than this, but for me it's like the underpainting. I do sell these finished paintings for $75 each if anybody's interested. Otherwise I'm going to end up with a whole bunch of these and not knowing what to do with them. Just either send it in an email through the Acorn, or you can message me on Facebook or Instagram, and I'll make arrangements for you to get it if you want it. Okay, now, there must be a cloud or something over here in the original, because this becomes very green, and it becomes green in a shadowy kind of way. So let's see, I've mixed up a green with yellow ochre, a little bit of light blue, yellow ochre. Yeah, I think that's it, yellow ochre and light blue. So you can take whatever blue you have and add a little white to it. Now your colors may not match mine exactly, partly because I use professional artist paints as opposed to student grade, but close is good enough because it's your painting, not mine. The one thing that I try to stress with my students when it comes to painting is, actually there's several things. One being, it's all about practice. You know, it takes practice, just like anything else, it takes practice. The other thing is, we used to call these sailors, Jack and I. I used to have a house off of Ravenna Avenue in Salem up on a big, huge hill. This was before Jack and I were married. And it was way up on a hill, and below it was this huge ravine, which was why it was called Ravina Avenue. And the ravine was about a 300-foot drop. And one day I was painting a model. We had hired a model. There was a bunch of us artists working out of my studio. I had a beautiful, probably 600-foot square studio. So a bunch of my friends and I would hire a model, and we'd paint. And I was painting this one model for, oh gosh, weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I realized my measurements were off, and that's why I wasn't getting what I wanted from it. And it was the last day the model was going to be there. And oh my goodness, I got so upset. I had these 8-foot windows, and I opened one up, and I sailed that painting right out the window down into the ravine. And it got to the point where I just kept doing it over the, time that I lived there. There must be at least 8 or 9 paintings down in that ravine. But anyways, we called them sailors because you know what? You paint them, you sail them, And I don't mean sail as in sell. I mean just toss them. Because it's your practice. And sometimes when I have a student who's really frustrated, it means one of two things. Either A, it's a sailor, and they just need to sail it and move on. Or B, it's a bridge painting. And a bridge painting is your mind and your understanding of where you want to go is more advanced than your physical hand. And so you struggle and you struggle and you struggle. But what you're doing is you're building in your mind that understanding of how to do it, even though you're not quite doing it. And then the next painting, you do it. So that's why it's a bridge painting. So try to understand where your frustrations are coming from. It has helped me over the years to, understand that. And I still get frustrated. People think, oh, well, you can paint anything. And yeah, I can. But I still get frustrated because you never completely learn. I'm still learning. I'm still practicing. It's always practice. Just like medicine is always practice because they never learn everything. Okay, so this back here is too warm. As things move away, they get cooler, and I'll probably cool this down too, but at the moment, this is way too warm. So that is actually a kind of a green-gray. Let's try this color and see if this works. I'm just going to do half of it and show you what that does. Do you see how that pushes that further away and this feels closer? I'm going to even push it further. There we go. Okay, now we're going to do it over here. And there's some darks in there too, but for the most part, I'm going to start, this would be my first layer. Now, the last thing I'm going to do before we say, if you want to stop here, you can, is I'm going to put some lights through here. And it's really kind of a yellowy orange. Let me try this color first. It might be too bright, but let's try it. Yeah, it's a little too bright. So I'm going to tone it down with a little bit of, I'm going to take some Naples yellow and a little bit of that color. And that color was made with, a little bit of orange, a little bit of cadmium yellow, and Naples yellow. And I found that it wasn't enough Naples yellow. So I'm going to take Naples yellow and I'm going to add that mixture to it. Let's see what we get. Oh, that's better. It's a little cooler, but it's okay. And I'm just going to throw in a few here. Remember they have those mounds. Now, what's good that it's a little cooler is because this is the color I'm going to use in the back. Okay, I'm going to warm it up for down here. And to warm it up, I just took some of this orange color and I added it to the Naples yellow. I'm talking about the medium orange, not the dark orange. And I'm going to start doing some downward strokes with that. Now, most grass, I say scribble, but marsh grass is very straight. So you can't scribble too much, you know. You put it in straight and then you scribble a little bit. Break up that line. Remember we talked about breaking up lines? I think we were talking about it with the mouse. Loved that mouse. Okay, now the grass in here, believe it or not, I think is the same color as that. Let's see what happens if we do that. It's important to have a floppy brush for this. If you have a really stiff brush or a brush you haven't washed very much, you're going to have a hard time with that. And if you're really serious into painting and you're following my videos, I suggest you use the brushes that I use, which are the red sables. You can get them from Blick. I don't think Michaels has them. They have the synthetics. And synthetics are good for some things, but I find with this, what happens with the synthetics is the oil paint gets way down here and it's hard to get it out. And then when you try to get it out, it splits, you know, where the red sables will keep their shape. And you know what? Honestly, they're about the same price. So, Blick Art Supply. I personally like, if you're in Massachusetts, I personally like Blick in Cambridge. It's kind of a small, you know, it doesn't feel like a big, huge company, and you can call them and talk to them, and there are many times with Acorn, I'm like, oh no, I'm out of white. And it's like, Meg from Blick, I need white. And she will sometimes deliver it to me straight herself to my house. The few times that I've gone to paint plein air at the marshes, I think I went to Essex. It was so nice to see the actual colors that you miss in a photograph. The problem is the greenhead flies. Oh my goodness. You have to completely be covered up, and of course if it's hot out, that's kind of tough. And the atmosphere can be a little rough when you're painting outside there. I unfortunately can't do plein air painting anymore because of my inability to stand for long periods of time or sit in an uncomfortable seat. Okay, I'm going to add a little more of that green, but I'm going to add a little bit of that dark with the green, you know, this dark here, because there's a little bit in here that you can see some stuff going on there, and you can see some stuff going on there. Now we need a little more uprights for here, but not too much. And just through here, and then that's it. We're not going to put it in the other parts. And not as much, you know, just a suggestion. Sometimes, you know, if you want it to look like 10 lines, only put in like 5, and it will read as 10. You know, that reads the same amount as this, and it's not. It's kind of like, let's say you're doing a portrait and the man's wearing a herringbone kind of suit. That's actually happened to me years ago, and this is why I'm using this example. And you want to put the details of the fact that he's wearing a herringbone suit, not because of the sake of the suit, but because of the era, you know. You're not going to put every herringbone print into it, you know. You're just going to put a suggestion here and there and here and there, and the whole suit will look like it is. So it's the same thing with grass. Here and there, and then the whole thing looks like it's all bushy. Now, interestingly enough, there are no reflections here that I can see. Maybe there is, and it's just the photograph is not showing it to me, but here's what I'm going to do. Because sometimes photographs will lie to you. Actually, all the time photographs will lie to you. You have to know a little bit so that you know what to add if it's not there. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit of this to soften that line and give a suggestion of a possible reflection there. Now the last thing I want to do before we say okay, you can stop here, is a little bit of light on here. And I'm going to use the Provence Violet with a little bit of white. And it's going to look just like white. And the reason why I added the Provence Violet is because if I just put the white, then it would feel too bright. But we know that ocean water, maybe lake water is, but ocean water is never like glass. There's always something going on in there, you know? Some sort of a little wave or a disturbance, the wind, something. Okay, so if you want to stop here, you can stop here. If you want to see me take this to the next level, then make sure you look for the next video. And in the meanwhile, stay safe, stay well, and we will meet again.